All right. Welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today my guest is the CEO of Classical Conversations, Robert Bortins. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Bryce, I'm doing well. Just enjoying the end of summer before we get back to homeschooling this fall.
I love it. Hey, so you and I were just talking offline here about what we wanted to discuss, and you're like me, you can talk about anything, and I love that. Um, I do want to get really quick your bio and background and how you came to be the CEO of Classical Conversations, and certainly let's hit that. But I think you and I can have fun on a number of topics. So start with your bio and background.
Yeah, so I was homeschooled through high school. Really enjoyed it, which is why I'm helping other people homeschool today. I earned an industrial engineering degree from Clemson University. During that time, my dad quit his job. My mom called me to tell me that they weren't paying for school anymore and that I had to pay the rest of my way. And she was going to try to start this homeschooling company called Classical Conversations. So I managed to work and go to school and scrimp by and survive and get a degree and worked as an engineer for a couple Fortune 50 companies and a small manufacturing firm. And then in 2012, I came back to work for the family business and help other people homeschool with Classical Conversations. And at that time, we were in about 40 states with about 40,000 students. Today, we are in 60 countries, about 130,000 students, and homeschool, or my wife does most of the homeschooling of our three kids, 10, 8, and 4, and we've been married for almost 12 years now. And she was a public school teacher for 10 years, so when we were starting to get serious, I had to have the homeschool talk with her to make sure that she was down for that before we got any more serious. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. And fun fact is, I played rugby at college and afterwards, and I've coached multiple Olympians and have won a couple national championships as a coach as well. So, I'm all sorts of, it's just not brains and beauty. It's also some bronze here.
I love that. I love that. Very good. Yeah, well, we homeschooled as well, and it is a calling. You do have to make sure you're on the same page for that, because it is a tremendous amount of work and a paradigm shift. One of the things that I realized is you kind of had to get out of your head the traditional schooling model because, parents don't need to stand up there and lecture their kids. And yet often parents are intimidated by it because they think that that's what it is you're recreating what you knew as a child. And no, you're really kind of creating a model that looks more like Little House on the Prairie, where all of your kids can be at different levels and you're kind of guiding them along the path of learning. And you're using great curriculum that was designed by people who know and can help you do it. And Classical Conversations is one of those that, although we used some classical style stuff, we did sort of an a la carte kind of customized approach, and it worked really well for us. But I admire greatly what you guys built, and I think it's a heck of a program, and I endorse it to people all the time who don't know where to begin or don't know what to grab. That's one of the ones that I mention and have you start with. But you really have to realize that everything that you thought you knew about schooling from your youth gets to get thrown out, and you have to think about it entirely differently.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, my wife, when she started homeschooling, our oldest, she spent all summer like preparing lessons plans. And, I was like, this isn't going to work. But I didn't say anything to her because she needed to learn on her own. And
Yeah.
about 8 weeks in, she was like throwing everything she did out and like, this isn't working. I was like, yeah, I know, but you wouldn't have listened to me if I told you had to experience it firsthand. And so, like, you have to understand that our modern education system is based on a system of education imported from Prussia, which is pre-World War I Germany. And the whole entire system was designed to create good soldiers so that their country could win wars. They had just lost a battle to Napoleon, and the empire didn't want to have that happen again, and so they ripped kids from their parents and then educated them through the state. and then Horace Mann and John Dewey and those predecessors saw what good little socialists it created and decided to bring it here to the United States. It took them about 50 years, from 1850 to 1900, to get the American populace to abandon their children to the state in what we call public school today. And now we're bearing the fruit of it. So yeah, don't bring that system home that kicked off the World War One into your house. Instead, go back to that classical method. And as you mentioned, I think most homeschoolers, after they do it a few years, kind of naturally go to a classical type methodology because it just works so well with the brain development of families. And so many families are excited to pick and choose what curriculum to do and try to figure it out. And that works out for a lot of families. Kind of our differentiator, or one of our differentiators at Classical Conversations, is, we've done, it was kind of started after I finished being homeschooled. So my mom had already kind of seen the fruit of her efforts and what worked and what didn't work. And she's been working with, hundreds of other moms over the last 30 years to put together this curriculum and put together communities where you can meet once a week with another parents and other students to, lift each other up and help each other out in our community model. So leave the public school at home. It takes a little while to, deprogram yourself and your children and try to embrace how God designed our minds to learn.
Yeah, well, it's again, wonderful program. I endorse what you guys put together and what you do, and I think it is, there is no one size fits all, and I really try not to, give people a hard time that don't choose that path. But I think once you have, and you get a little bit under your belt, to, take it 1 year at a time, all of a sudden you're coming out with amazing kids on the other end of it, who are able to express their own creative brains and, play to their own gifting, which is ultimately, I think, what, God wants us to do. So it gives you that opportunity like nothing else. And, and again, it's not right for everybody, but it is a heck of a path. And I think it bears some tremendous fruit.
Absolutely. I mean, every parent has to decide what God says in the Bible, but I think the Bible is pretty clear that no matter what path you choose, that you're going to be the one responsible. And certain paths want to convince you that you can just turn your children over to them and they'll do it for you. And that's not the case, no matter what education system your child.
Yeah, I don't think outsourcing your parental responsibilities is all that great of an idea. So, let's talk a little bit. I'd love to get your thoughts on the Department of Education, and people are, on both sides of the issue, think that that's either going to be, if we eliminate the federal Department of Education, everything we'll have the answers to everything right then and there, or if we do that, then nobody could possibly get an education ever again. Love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, the Department of Education, Trump has asked Linda McMahon to shut it down, and they're in the process of doing that. It was formed, I think, in the 1970s. Every single educational outcome that you could measure since then has decreased. We've spent billions, if not trillions of dollars, and the outcome has been terrible. And of course, the farther you get away from the decision-making of the parents and that natural God-given right, the more expensive and the worse the effort, and the worse the outcomes are going to be for that effort. And so closing it down is a step, but really what we're going on right now is hiding the problem. The problem is the laws that the federal government have enacted, at a federal level that the states have to obey. So even if you end the Department of Education, if you still have laws that reflect the ideology coming out of the United Nations and World Economic Forum, you're still going to have a big problem. And so we need to just get federal government not just out of the funding of education, but out of the making of laws for education altogether, because they've done a terrible job over the last 50 years or so. And so I applaud, it's a good step to close the department down, But now we need the legislators to, one, formally close it down, and two, roll back kind of the educational laws that the federal government has mandated on the states that it does not have the constitutional right to do, and definitely does not have the God-given blessing to do either.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and I have the same take. If we don't really collapse it completely and remove those laws, then the states, it's a little bit like the abortion debate. Yeah, okay, we got rid of Roe v. Wade, but now we've got this sort of completely chaotic, states issue all over the place. And now, you're fighting thousands of these little battles. And, it's noble battles to fight, but we've got to get rid of what the federal government did in enshrining so much of that ideology into our system at large. And so you're 1,000% correct there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, once we end the Department of Education at the federal level, now we need to do it at the 50 states level. So all of those departments of education are all pretty new to our country, and they didn't necessarily start out with that or the level of control. It used to all be controlled locally by your local communities and counties and parents, and they kept telling them, like, well, we'll be able to get you better curriculum for cheaper if we centralize these departments, and the state can do all this research and give you the best curriculum because it's going to have all these experts and it's going to cost you less money. And all we've seen is the power of the state grow and
Yeah.
educational outcomes decrease and taxes increase. So we really got to get to the point where it's all controlled locally, and the most local is, of course, the parents.
That's exactly right. And there's so many people pushing for school choice, which I suspect you and I might have the same opinion on this. I don't think it's the answer, and I don't think you do either. So let's talk about why we wouldn't want to have our tax dollars go towards homeschooling or anything that we as parents want to direct it towards. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the school choice is really a school capture movement, and we've seen this in Europe, where school choice have been implemented for decades. The choices have evaporated, and all they're left is government control. And I'm doing a little bit of research on this, but when Karl Marx wrote his 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, the 10th plank is called free public schools. Now, public schools have a very specific meaning today in the United States. But if you actually go back to the 1830s, public schools in the United States were actually what we would call private schools today. They were open to the public, so you could go enroll your kid in, pay the fees, etc. In the United Kingdom, today, what we call private schools in the U.S. are still called public schools, and they were still called public schools back then, where it was open to the general public versus the schools that were only available to the aristocrats. And so if you think about Karl Marx's ideology, it wasn't about building new things. It was all about taking over things through the power of government and the power of the purse. And so really what I believe Karl Marx would write today would be free private education. That's really how it should be considered. And so it's really just taking this ideology that our students and our children belong to the state, and that the state can force our neighbors to pay for our kids' education, and taking it out of the public school and putting that same mentality into homeschoolers and to the private education sphere. So it's really an education takeover. You'll hear people say, well, it's going to save the state money. I'll say Arizona, which is touted as the gold standard of school choice, pre their school choice, they spent about $10 billion per year on 1.1 million children. After school choice, including those now captured inside the system, they've actually got 50,000 less students and are spending $12.5 billion. So they've actually increased their budget 23% while decreasing the number of students by 50,000. And that's including the new ESA students that they're spending about $1 billion a year on. So you can see that this is just more taxation that's going to be put on all of our backs. When the disciples asked Jesus about taxation, And one of the examples that he gives is when the Roman soldiers would make them carry their bags for a mile. Jesus told them to go the second mile. And so for Christians, when we go the second mile, that means that we're paying for our own kids' education, that we're doing that freely without duress under the state, and that we're not necessarily recognizing the state's right to tax us, but we're just saying that's part of what it is. So we got to understand that as soon as we start taking the governor's money, we become the governor's soldiers, that whoever pays the piper chooses the tune. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Ronald Reagan, the 9 scariest words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And so we're just continuing to advance the Marxist ideology of the state over family when we embrace these school choice initiatives.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. The only way I'd be seeing it as successful is to just do it as a tax credit kind of format. And because anytime you are getting money from them versus just retaining more of your own, then they can start to put strings attached to it. And they might start off like, oh yes, whatever you choose, whatever you want, whatever you do this, all those things start to have little attachments to them. Like, yes, that's great, we can do that, but you have to have CPS come into your home every quarter to make sure you're doing a good job and your kids aren't being abused. Or, hey, that's great, but we also need you to include X, Y, and Z in your homeschool curriculum. And even if it started out pure in the beginning, that over time they do whatever they could to capture it according to their ideology. And once people start accepting that money and becoming reliant upon it, then they'll be reluctant to push back and they'll accept more and more of those things because, hey, I've got this extra money, I can't live without it. And so it's always dangerous to, give in to any of those things. I could not agree with you more that it really is just better to, grit your teeth and figure out how to get it all done.
Yeah, I mean, there's no laws on the books that let you just keep your own money. And so when the school choice proponents say, yeah, it's just you're getting your money back, well,
Mm-mm.
show me a law that you've written that does that. So there's not like a box on your property taxes that say I'm not using the public schools to educate my kid, let me keep half of it, or something like that. And people say, well, that's just a slippery slope. Well, I'll tell you, it is not. First of all, like in Michigan has had these programs for a while, and there was a homeschool co-op, and they started every day with prayer, but they got audited, and the state said you can't pray anymore in your co-op. And this was a group that said, well, if the state ever puts any strings on it, then we'll just stop taking the money. Well, what they did instead was stop praying.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah, they got used to it. It always
Yep.
works that way. You
Yep.
get dependent. I mean, that's how you have institutional capture of not for profits.
Yep.
People start giving them money and start demanding that they adhere to certain things or put certain board members on, and all of a sudden the good work that thing was doing is not quite as good as it once was. And people get dependent upon what they're being given. But yeah, if you're allowed to just keep more of your own money, I'd be on board.
Yeah, and what we're seeing in some of these states, like if you think about homeschooling, it's kind of there's almost no sort of financial corruption in it because you're earning the money, you're paying it to a vendor. There's very little to no red tape, and you're making that decision. Well, now we see these ESA families coming in these states, and they're spending the money on like Disney World or hockey, trips, and they're calling those educational endeavors. They're buying $2,000 coffee machines and saying that they're using it for a barista elective. They're remodeling their house and saying it's for their educational endeavors. And so these, with other people's money always comes corruption. And then when the corruption comes, the legislators aren't going to be able to allow this to continue. So they'll, of course, need to put strings and more strings on it. And they're not going to differentiate between myself, a private homeschooler who's not taking the money, and one that is. And so it's not a slippery slope. It's a it's a wet field with a fireman spraying it that you can see off in the side, and you're telling people you're gonna fall. Every single person on this hill's fallen throughout history, and they're like, no, you're just being paranoid. It's like, no, it's gonna happen, and then it happens, and then they pretend like they didn't fall at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, I exactly share your position there. I think you're totally right. So hey, there's a lot of things that are going on in the news today. You and I were hitting a couple of them just for fun right when we began. I'd love to talk to you about that. We thought that once we won this election and kind of defeated the communists that they would be quiet, but they're just running around calling us all Nazis now and doubling down on their need and desire for us to all involuntarily share with them everything that we are doing. One of the latest is everybody's being called a Nazi who uh, appreciated or thought the Sydney Sweeney American jeans ad, American Eagle jeans ad was funny. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's better that we're lusting after good-looking blondes than all these jeans ad with transgenders and people who probably need to go on Ozempic and all sorts of things like that. I mean, we need to go back to traditional values, and I'm old enough to remember when the conservatives would have been horrified at that type of ad instead of applauding it. It's possibly a step in the right direction away from all this trans madness that we've seen encompass us from just the Marxists, but it's just another part of our consumerism mindset where we work jobs that we don't like to buy things that we don't need, and just a good reminder for us to try to help our children become anti-fragile and not buy into that mindset, but have a heavenly mindset instead. But I definitely am glad that we're getting away from promoting people who clearly have unsafe health practices in their own lives, and people who seem to embrace having our body more as a temple and keeping it in good shape.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, it's been interesting because for years now, the idea was the cultivation of ugliness, and
Yeah.
all of the ad campaigns we're featuring, the more extremes, of our fallen culture. You mentioned, yeah, the transgenders and jeans, and all of those sort of things became the thing, and everybody coloring their hair and the fat acceptance and multiple piercings and all that stuff became sort of the thing. And I am seeing a vibe shift, but I find it funny that side is slamming it because they're considering that ad to be something like Nazi propaganda because she happens to be attractive and white.
Yeah.
Which is wild. I mean, you may share this opinion. Beauty is beauty. I honestly don't really care that much. A person's beautiful. They're beautiful regardless of the color of their skin or what. I mean, it's almost really an objective thing to be pleasing to the eyes. And I think it's an affront to God that beauty has been so attacked. And I'm finding it so bizarre that many of the people that are attacking her whiteness are white themselves, and also at the same time, applauding or telling us that we're afraid of babies because we don't. We find it interesting that the number one name across the globe for a new baby boy is Muhammad right now.
Mm.
That should be somewhat alarming if in Ireland, it's not Seamus and it's Muhammad.
Yeah, well, it's definitely showing the fall of Western civilization and our idea that beauty is not in the eye of the beholder, but is in the eye of the creator. And
Amen.
that doesn't necessarily mean you're worth more or less depending on the facial structure of your bones, but that there are things that are objectively good. And as part of that, just kind of attack again on what is true, good, and beautiful, what is virtuous, those things that made our country great to begin with, not perfect, but they are attacking that. I mean, it's partly because they've put in this white guilt, obviously, in a big portion of our society by spreading inaccurate historical references. And of course, they've been doing that and pushing that through the school system in our country to hate ourselves. And part of the way that you get out of, if you're a white male or white female, you're automatically an oppressor. And so you have to be an ally, that whole sort of terminology. That's why we see a rise often in some, LGBT and transgender confusion, because that's really the only way for you to become a minority and so that you can be part of the oppressed instead of being an oppressor. And so it all just kind of builds on itself on this ideology that we imported from Prussia in the 1850s through Horace Mann, and we see the fruit of it. But ultimately, we need people willing to step up and not be worried about being calling a racist or a bigot, because we think that we should have equal representation in our advertising, and that doesn't make you any sort of Nazi or anything like that. And it's pretty typical of them. And look, the research shows the left has a significant mental health crisis. I think something like 60 or 70% of white women who vote Democrat have a mental health issue that they've seen someone for in the last year. So it really is, self-hate is a mental health issue.
Yeah, it is, and it has been proliferating out there among the left. And God has made us all in His image. I think we all have unique beauty and things that we can bring to the table. Not everybody is symmetrically beautiful as some of the celebrated beauties of all time, but cultivate the beauty that God's given you. Don't go in the opposite direction. And we see that be a big thing on the left with the way that they will destroy their bodies and destroy their faces and accentuate the worst things, and it just creates more of that. And we need to be teaching these kids to love who God made them, not hate themselves. And the first step in that, man, is finding good schooling and good family-centered schooling. I mean, it's why the homeschool kids will look you in the eyes and can carry conversations with adults across all ages, and end up being some of the hardest working people on the planet too, which is what I love to see. So, good on you, and classical conversations and everything else. Well, you get the last word, man. Before I ask you, how we follow and support you guys, anything else on your mind? Anything else that God's put on your heart to talk about in the last few minutes of the show here?
Yeah, I mean, I just always like to remind parents, as we mentioned earlier, you're responsible for these kids. There are so many things in this world that you and I are not prepared for those conversations, because they aren't things that we saw growing up. And it really is rooted in this public school woke ideology that's been pushed by the left for not just decades, but really for the last century. They've been pushing our culture in this direction. And we need to work back, and not just to the 1990s where we had hot celebrities in front of the American Eagles and all the malls. We need to go back to true beauty and women and men, holding themselves, up with dignity and respect for their bodies and respect for the people around them. And so you got to do that by by cultivating a virtuous society. And we do that by taking responsibility for our kids' education, and doing that with a classical methodology is a great way to do it. But ultimately, do not outsource your child's education to anyone. yeah, get help if you need it, but know at the end of the day that it is your responsibility. And I think your kids will be healthier, wealthier, and wiser if you do that.
Amen. Amen. So, how do we follow you? Pay attention to what you're personally doing. And if people want to get involved and explore classical conversations, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I'm really out there on X, the Robert B Show. You can see that on my handle on the screen. You can go to my website, robertbortins.com, to see my latest op-eds and articles. And then classicalconversations.com is where you're going to want to go to get information about homeschooling with CC. You can put in your zip code. We're going to connect you with a local homeschooling parent that can help you get started, answer your questions. Maybe you can take you to a local community so you can go to an open house or an information meeting. But classicalconversations.com, and of course, Classical Conversations is on all the socials, and kind of Instagram's our big bet there. But you can find us on Facebook and as well. So those are all the best places to go. So would love to have you follow me and find out more about Classical Conversations.
Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate you coming on and spend this time with me. To God be the glory, and we are out.
Out. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for watching or listening to this show. If you are someone who listens to us on the podcast apps, please go to our Rumble channel. Even if you're not going to watch us there, we'd appreciate you hitting subscribe. We want to boost those numbers up and make sure that that channel continues to grow. But again, thank you so much for listening to us.